Good afternoon, everyone. So thanks, Sigurdur. Thanks to colleagues for the presentations. So I'm going to talk about the key issues we had to face with respect to data and the limitation that we encountered to carry out the research we wanted to. So I'm speaking here from mainly the perspective of the modeling work done at IDRI, but there are many cross-cutting issues with what has been presented by colleagues from IAMO and Lucas as well. So really similar issues. In terms of the content, I will briefly introduce the question, then come back to the conceptual approach that was developed in MORC Package 8 in particular. So in terms of foresight to identify the options for a just transition of EU food value chains. And then going to more details, analyzing the needs in terms of data. And I will focus on the processing industry where we have the biggest gaps, I would say, and I will conclude. So by way of introduction, just repeating what has already been said by Liz, but we have a clear direction of travel that from scientific perspective, from IPCC, that says basically that our food system generates 30% of anthropogenic emission. We have clear also insight from the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services telling us that the food system is the biggest driver of biodiversity loss, both within and outside agro-ecosystems. We have nutrition challenges that are clearly identified by WHO, and those clear elements have been translated into strategies, be it the Farm to Fork strategy or at national level. We have French, for example, the National Low Carbon Strategy. Yet we have a gap between those strategies and concrete regulations, concrete policies that would implement the content of the strategies. And one of the key issues behind that is that we have a lot of policy and political questions arising from the general direction of travel that is outlined from, I would say, a biophysical point of view, in terms of the livelihood, in terms of the cost of food, has been mentioned in the chat as well, and in terms of the jobs that are provided by the agri-food industry and the risk of losing those jobs in a context where the agri-food industry is the first manufacturing industry across the European Union. And yet those so what is feared from the part of policymakers and a lot of actors is that if we go in the direction outlined by science, we run the risk of increasing the cost of food, of destroying jobs, of reducing farmers' incomes. And this is fueled by the limitations of existing modeling tools, be it the general equilibrium model used by the USDA in its last report last year, saying that if the Farm to Fork will be implemented as it would have tremendous impacts on food security, the cost of food, and the competitiveness of the European Union. And we also had, with a lot of question in the way it was explained by the GSE report published during the summer, that relies on a bit different model, but which is still a partial equilibrium model, which basically says that you can have benefits from an environmental point of view, but reduction in production and potential side effects from an economic point of view. And all that in a context where those models might not well represent what needs to be represented, in the sense that they do not hold fully together the biophysical and the socioeconomic dimension of food system transition. So what is needed is a conceptual approach that enables us to better take into consideration both dimensions, so people and planet, if I put it very bluntly, and then to think about what could be a just transition of food value chains. And here comes the question of data in a minute. So how to hold together biophysical and socioeconomic dynamics and why to do so. And first, maybe what do we call a just transition? Basically, the capacity of the transition to a green economy, in our case, a green economy of the food system, to sustain decent jobs and livelihood to all. And the thing is that, as I said, we have biophysical models that are really robust in saying what needs to be done to keep the food system within planetary boundary, but that are totally unable to consider the socioeconomic issues that are associated to that in terms of jobs, in terms of incomes, in terms of cost of food, which are basically the three main questions. And we have the sort of supply-demand equilibrium models that I mentioned just earlier, be it Capri, Magnets, GTAP, or those models that are usually used to assess the effects of a change in the policy framework, that are very good at doing that, but well less good at apprehending the effect of structural transformations of food systems from a biophysical point of view. So, and yet, of course, we know that by 2030 and by 2050, if we want to keep the food system within planetary boundaries, all farms, processing industries, and consumer behaviors will have or will structurally change, and we need to account for those. So we need to couple dynamics, biophysical dynamics, socioeconomic dynamics, and link the functioning of food chains to the sort of impacts we want to apprehend. And a way to do that, at least a way that has been explored in the framework of value mix, is a model which is basically a supply model and not a supply-demand equilibrium model, whereby we start with the physical conditions or the physical questions, and where we try to understand upon which conditions transformations of food chain dynamics, including import and export, can be both coherent with the biophysical dimensions we outlined and generate virtuous impacts on incomes, employment, jobs, and the cost of food. And upon which conditions, of course, we are talking about policy conditions. So that's the sort of model we've been working with. And how it works, it's really simple. The idea is that it couples biophysical and socioeconomic dimensions by looking at the labor intensity and at the total labor force employed in the system as the product of the labor intensity of the production and an indicator of the production, here expressed in tons or liters of milk, if you take the example of milk. And of course, with the question of labor, total labor force, comes the question of income, which is not in the scope of my presentation, but the idea is to be able to characterize the evolution of production costs based on the changes in the production systems and identify the conditions of viability on prices and subsidies. This is not part of the presentation, but it's, again, there is a matter of data here. So if we look at agriculture, at the agricultural side, what we've done is to identify farming systems now and how they can evolve by 2030. The question is how many workers can be employed in such a system as the sum of all farming system types per the labor intensity of each farming systems. And we did the same for the food industry. What is key here is to understand is that we were able to characterize each type of farming systems and to characterize the labor intensity of each farming system and to characterize the production cost of each farming system, because we were able to rely on FADN data that precisely gives disaggregated data at the level of farms. When it came to the food industry, we wanted to do the same and say, okay, what's the key strategy of each food processing company in terms of market orientation or type of products sold, etc. But the thing is that the only data we had were either aggregated data at the level of the product, so Prodcom data, or aggregated data at the level of a subsector by code NAS, or we had disaggregated data using Amadeus, but I will come to that in a minute. Those data were not exactly fitted to what we wanted to do. So we had to work at a very aggregated level and to be able to characterize, okay, given the production, given the total volumes that are like produced in a given physical scenario, how are those volumes allocated into different types of factories, if I put it very simply, between butter, if you take the example of milk, between butter, cheese, milk, yogurt, etc. And we can have a breakdown per product category and per, hopefully, unit size. So which types of factories is processing which types of product. And then we had to make assumption regarding how those different volumes are used, either in terms of consumption here or in terms of exploitation, and how much is imported, of course. Again, here, if you want to apprehend the impact on jobs of such a transformation, the only thing we were able to do is to calculate the total labor by 2030 as the sum of the labor intensity of each sector, so butter, cheese, milk, and yogurt, per the volume processed per each categories. But we were not able to go into the details and say, okay, if the cheese is processed under that form, like a very specialty cheese like this and that, or a very commodified cheese, it makes a difference in terms of the labor intensity of the production. So what types of data needs or what types of challenges do we have to face in that context? The data we have at the moment, as I said, at the farm level, we have FADN data, so we can reconstruct the labor intensity of the production per type of farm, per strategy of farmers, and we have the capital intensity as well. But at the processing level, the data available do not account for the physical volumes passing through the different types of industries. So we have very aggregated data, and when we have disaggregated data at the level of the company, we don't know how much that company process in terms of volume. So we cannot hold together, as I said, the physical dimension of a scenario with the economic dimension of a scenario. And that's where we have a big issue in terms of reconciling volumes and values or socioeconomic dimensions and biophysical dimensions. The other limitations we had to face is the fact that complete data is often available only in an aggregated form at the national level, as I said earlier. And we don't have data regarding how much a given factory process under the form of very commodified production or under the form of differentiated, linked to the territory or linked to the characteristics of the production, of the actual production. And when we had data available for specific firms using Amadeus data, or in our case in France, Orbis, which is the French declination of Amadeus, it is often very incomplete, very few data, for example, on production costs, and big firms are overrepresented in the sample. And just to give you some data here, you can see that basically you have mainly firms over 5,000 persons that are represented in the sample, while in reality they represent a very small part of the sample. We had another problem when data are available for specific firms using Orbis. It is provided at the legal entity scale, which means that we don't have information regarding business strategies at the company scale when firms are holding that hold or that own several companies, and there are many that are under that form. If you take the example of Danone, Danone is a huge holding, and Danone has many brands, and each brand has many factories. And what is needed if you really want to apprehend the transformation of the system is to have information at each scale. And using Amadeus, you only have information regarding Danone at a very aggregated level. And it is very useless if you want to characterize the transformation of the production system and of the factories, etc., etc. So we cannot analyze specific production processes happening at facility scale or the processing scale, etc. In particular, in terms of labor intensity, capital intensity, etc. So again, not possible in that context to link biophysical fluxes with socioeconomic questions, at least in a more disaggregated way than what we were able to do. Last but not least, we have a lot of firms operating in multiple sectors that are accounted only once for one sector, while we know that they are processing raw material coming from very diverse sectors, And again, if you want to connect socioeconomic and physical questions, you have to face a big challenge. So in terms of conclusion, and I was probably a bit too fast, the key aspects we need to better understand in a just transition perspective, what is needed is to better understand the relationship between volumes and value creation at all levels, because what is ultimately at stake when we look at the EU food system is the question of gradually reducing potentially, for example, animal protein, or at least some animal protein production, while keeping as much as possible the value which is generated in the system. And to do that, to characterize the relationship between volumes processed and value creation, we have to be able to capture the heterogeneity of the processing industry. So which means to be able to characterize or to build a typology of firms that is based on size and type of production. And this is at the moment not really possible. And we have this big issue regarding the relationships between scales, processing units, companies, or firms. I don't repeat that. And we also have one last big point, which was faced by our colleague at IMO, which is that the sort of data we have for trade are data regarding trade between countries, while we know that what is really needed is the level of trade between companies rather than between countries. And this is the sort of data that is very difficult to collect. So that's the sort of complex issues we had to deal with. I should say that even for when it's mandatory for companies to register their data publicly, it is often not done. So I think it was important to remind that as well. Thank you very much, and sorry